Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician. I've got something interesting to share with you. I was on vacation just a week ago with my family down in North Carolina. We rent a beach house every year on Topsail Island. Been doing that my entire life. We've been traveling down there once a year to do that, and had great weather. It was after a hurricane had just come through, so it was kind of rainy the week before, but everything was good while we were down there, and I had time to do a lot of magic. We often will play Texas Hold'em in the evenings every night, and whoever loses has to take the trash out. That's how we play. So, because we do that, there's a deck of cards, or at least a couple decks of cards with the poker set that are sitting there. So, kind of a natural environment to grab some cards and do some magic, do some card magic with a deck that's shuffled and in use. So one afternoon, I was doing performing some of my material, and all impromptu material with a shuffled deck in use. And I did a trick that I do. It's a thought of card trick I call Haystack. It's on some of my products out there. Open Mic, I feature the trick. It's the last effect in a series of sequential tricks with a shuffled deck in use as part of that routine. I did it as a one-off, and something interesting happened, which can happen with this kind of effect, where it's a thought of card, but there's some instructions that are given to the spectator that lead them to think of one of three cards that they see. The sensation is that they could be thinking of any card in the deck because it's all shuffled and mixed up. But by showing some cards and then saying, here, go ahead, think of one that you see, and then they think of one, and then you find it. Now, you don't know what card they're thinking of, but the revelation, the sequence of revelation allows you to appear to reveal the card, the one card that they are thinking of, apparently from a shuffled deck. That's the effect. It has a couple of, like I said, it's a sequential out, a series of out, so it's a multiple out kind of a revelation. But they don't see it that way. Their reality sees it as, experiences the effect as a single revelation. Okay, anyway, I'm doing this effect, and what can happen with this, very rarely, but it depends on how closely the spectator is listening and if you have their attention. And apparently in this moment I did not, and I'm assuming this is what happened. The other possibility is that the effect mechanically failed, that something got mixed up, but I don't think that's what happened. I think what happened is I had them thinking of a card, and I say think of one that you see, right? And I think they were thinking of any card. I think they were thinking of a card that they had seen, not part of that series of three, or they were thinking of a card, just a completely random card, not one that they were looking at, and that's where they got their card at. So this presents a problem, because when I get to the revelation, which fortunately for this effect, the way the revelations work, at least on the first one, it doesn't come off as if you've done anything wrong. But I do have a stop selection where I'm shuffling. They say stop, and then I can reveal that they had found their card. And when I got to that, it wasn't their card, because they were thinking of something different. It wasn't the card that was in play. So the effect failed. Now, I've seen on the forums a number of times, what do you do? What do people do when something goes wrong in that kind of magic? A thought of card or a selected card, find the card kind of thing. Obviously, there's very little you can do when you have effects that are very specific in terms of the outcome. But in these kinds of generic revelation effects, where there's a singular card that's in mind, and then it is located, what kinds of things can you do when something goes wrong? And I've talked about this before. I mean, the first thing that I say you can do is you can just admit that it went wrong and move on and do something else. However, I think many times with these kinds of effects, there are opportunities where you can salvage the trick. You don't really salvage the trick, but you rather replace the trick with a different outcome. And you treat the procedure as a failed magician plot. This is a plot in magic that we all know about. The plot that the trick failed, but then there's a kicker that demonstrates that, there was some kind of control and a predestined outcome all along. And the number one solution that I see people give on this is card to pocket. So simple card to pocket, and the essence of that is you go back to the deck and you say, what was the card you were thinking of? It was the 5 of diamonds, right? And you look through the cards and you acquire control somehow. Now, one way to do this would be to just simply cut the card to the top. So when you get to the card, you just simply cut at that. And when I do something like this, if I'm going to control this way, I will push off a few more cards and then a few more cards so that I get into a pattern of reversing the spread stack by stack so that it doesn't look like a single cut has been made. But now I've controlled it to the top of the deck. And then from here, you can get control of the card, either palm it or cop it, and then put it in the pocket. What I did in this case was I just went to my spread call. So they say, and whatever card it was, two of spades will say. And I went through and I said, the 2 of spades, are you sure? The 2 of spades? It wasn't something else, right? And in doing that, I get control of it. And I have it called, and I'm in jogging the card below so that as I close the spread, I can grab a pinky break above it on the margin that's sticking out, and then I square. So now I have it in pinky with a pinky break on it, and it's a simple matter to cop it at this point. Now, rather than going to pocket, because I am not a fan of palming, I despise it. If I want to palm a card, I would prefer to cop a card, and I would prefer to lap the card. However, in this moment, I improvised a different route. It happened that the box was sitting there, oriented actually like this. So the top is facing this way. And I said, are you sure it's in the deck? Because I actually don't see it there. Which actually reminds me, you said the 2 of spades, right? 2 of spades. Well, that's very curious because that's the one that I keep in the box. And I dumped it out like this. Now, what's comical about this is that the box was oriented in this way with the top facing out or facing inward. And when I cop the card and I pick up the box and I go to dump, it would actually be falling out of the bottom of the box, right? And I set the box down. They didn't care. They didn't notice. It didn't matter, which brings up a few different things. Okay. It was successful. All right. I did it. Saved the trick. Okay. And they were blown away and couldn't believe. So it was a failed trick plot, although it was a failed trick. And then the revelation was something very intentional. It's in the box. And it suited my comfort level. In that I'm okay to cop a card and find it quickly in a very close location. This little move here, by the way, in the box, this is a Danny Day Ortiz revelation that I've seen. However, if you're going to do this intentionally, you'd want to have the box facing that way, right? Because when you go to a cop or palm and dump, you want to be able to pick up the box. So the way this looks, it's in cop, and I reach over and I pick up the box like this. You can see it sticking out, but it really doesn't matter because the movement is so fluid. You pick up the box, turn it over, hold the box, and release from the pinky and kick the card out, and then it's as if it came from the box. Now, in my case, like I said, the box was backwards, so I did that. It didn't matter, though. It's because I guess what's curious is that the box, when it was put back down, the top is facing that way. It just goes to show that sometimes details don't matter as much as you think, and in the I don't want to go on to say that you shouldn't think about the details because I'm very detail oriented. But in this moment of improvisation, which is something I don't typically do, I don't usually improvise tricks. Very rarely will I bother to do that. If I do, it will be a very direct kind of effect using a staple method. But this was not that situation. But in a moment of improvisation, it still worked nonetheless. Now, the question is why... I don't like to do things like this. I don't like copying. I don't like palming. I would never choose to do that. But I found myself in reflection afterward extremely comfortable with how it happened. And actually thinking even in the moment when the trick failed, thinking instantly, I know what to do about this, just looking at the environment. And I was very comfortable, and I even felt more bold and comfortable in doing this than I did doing the actual trick, because the actual trick itself has a little bit of risk to it. So why did I feel better about it? Why did I feel better about it? Well, a couple things that I thought about in reflection. First of all, there is something in phenomenon that happens when a trick fails. And this is something you should remember if you're going to save an effect. Okay, if you have an effect that can be saved by improvisation, keep this one thing in mind when things go wrong. When things go wrong, as we think about it from the outside looking in, with respect to the possibility of things going wrong, we presume that the heat goes up. Once the trick has failed, now the heat is on even hotter than it was during the trick. But that's not true. The heat's entirely off because the trick failed. In this trick, in the magician failure plot, the heat actually goes to the basement in the realization that the effect has failed. So keep that in mind, that if that is how that plot works, then in reality, that is also how it works. I found myself just experiencing this. Trick failed. What was the card you were thinking of? The what? That's not the card I was thinking of. Really? In this moment, all of the heat is off. And what the spectator does, and what this particular spectator did, and a couple people watching, the first thing they did was they looked away from the deck and they looked at my face. I think this is a universal response. Why would they get their eyes off of the cards where the heat is at and get it up to my face? Well, they want to see my reaction, which brings up the point that if you're ever going to do the magician fails plot intentionally, make sure that the failure is convincing. Make sure that your acting is good and that you sell the point that the trick failed. Make sure you invest in that moment. That's not it? Are you sure? You sure? Make sure you sell it. Make sure your response to that is a natural and realistic response, as if something actually did occur. In this case, it really did fail, and they looked immediately at me to see my reaction. The second thing that took the heat off is that I went looking for the card. As you're looking for the card, and remember this for spread calls or for a cut call, if you're just going to cut it. When you go to look for the card, there's no heat on this either, because there's no assumption of a move. I'm literally trying to look for the card. That's all I'm doing. And as they're looking at me doing that, they don't assume any kind of move. They assume that they say the 5 of spades. They assume I'm going to just take the 5 of spades out. There's nothing to presume about this moment. So they get relaxed and they don't focus on the deck. And I noticed that in retrospect as I was thinking about this, that I felt good about the moment because they were relatively careless with their sight lines and with their attention. Looking at what I'm doing, kind of laughing, looking back up at me again, even looking away at sometimes, which is all kinds of opportunity to do dirty work. And that's perhaps... that in itself is a good enough reason to not indulge in maybe doing a spread call in that moment. If you are looking for a card and the goal is to make it appear as if the card is not there, maybe a move is not essential. Maybe you could just cut it to the top. I mean, why not? They say the 4 of hearts, and you go and you cut and you just keep spreading and cut and keep spreading on top as if you're trying to find it. And you say, are you sure it's a 4 of hearts? I don't see it in there. Now, in this situation, you don't have a natural pinky break to grab it because you've cut it to the top in a packet. So the way I usually do this kind of thing, if I ever need to cop a card that's from Square, I keep the cards in Biddle with coverage on the my right, their left side, and this is a pretty standard way to get a pinky break on a single card from the bottom or the bottom side of the deck as you're holding it. You just touch the pads of your fingers to that card and push it over just about 1/4 of an inch, and then re-grip, and now you have an overhang here. You have an in-jog towards the hand where you can grab with the pinky and get that break. So cut it to the top. The heat's off anyway. You're supposed to be looking for it. Very, very simple. And in proximity, in this particular revelation, the box is sitting right here. Maybe as a habit, always put the box there, right? And if you want to be detail-oriented, keep the top facing that way. Okay. Apparently, it doesn't matter, though. In my situation, it just didn't matter. But if you want to be always planning for this or use this as an effect, that's how you do it. And now you're set to do a cop, which is, I think, a lot easier to do in the open than a palm. A palm requires more of a move than a cop does. A cop really only requires a pinky break and a squaring, a very natural squaring motion. So in this case, the way it goes from here is you reach down, you push back. As I'm saying, are you sure? Because, and as I say because, I push back, I keep it in pinky. It's now down below the ridge of the first finger. I bring the cards back up, so I have the card hanging out back below, which is out of sight from everybody, from every single angle except for mine. I square forward. Now here's a little detail that I do naturally when I do this, and I did this in this case. When I go to remove this card, what I do is I pass the deck forward, almost as if to hand it to them. They might even go to grab it. And if they don't, what I do is I just set it down. If they go to grab it, I let them take the deck. I say, are you sure it's not in there? Because, and I put the deck out here for them to take in this case, the spectator actually did reach for it. And then I reach over in this motion. Direction is here, attention is here, misdirect is here. I grab the box, fluid motion, turn it over, dump it out, and I say, that's the one that I keep in the box. And then there it is. So there's an out for you, worst case scenario, especially if you're sitting at a table. If you're standing up, maybe the better out is to go card to pocket, which you can do from cop as well, right? So if you have to cop it in this way, you would, or rather reveal it in this way. It's the same exact motion. Cop it back. Are you sure? Because hand the deck out and then reach back. And what I would prefer to do this personally, as with this case where the box doesn't really matter where it's oriented, it's so quick. Here it would have come out of the bottom of the box, but they don't necessarily think about that. Same kind of idea. Rather than go to your front pocket, you can get this out of sight fast by going to a back pocket, and you don't actually go to the pocket. It's really simple. You just copy, you say, because, bring the hand behind it. And think about the sight lines here. In terms of the margin of the card sticking out of the bottom on a cop, they never actually get to see that. It's never shown to anybody because the hand stays in proper orientation, goes right to the side without turning or turning over. You say, because I always keep this one in my pocket. And then you mime or pretend to take it out of a back pocket, and then you show it. So that can be another way to do this. I think the box thing is stronger because it creates an additional illusion. This is actually a stronger illusion than anything else I had done. This effect is a cerebral effect, the one I was attempting to do. A thought of card, they stop it, they find the card. There was no illusion in the effect at all. It was merely a probability outcome, which I prefer anyway. This, however, is an illusion. I'm creating the illusion that the card is in the box. And that being said, it's a simple illusion to pull off. It really is. Cop, Well, it's interesting. It's not in there because that's the one I keep in the box, and yeah, everything is pretty well masked, especially with the cards facing upward like this. Even if that card is seen, right? Even if that card is seen here, this moment is so fleeting and camouflage because obviously the card blends in with the box, especially if the back side is the side of the box with the back design is facing up. So anyway, just a couple thoughts that I, and reflections I had from a moment this past week where something didn't go right. I was able to save the trick doing that little cop and card found in box kind of situation. So thought of card found in box, that could be the intentional effect, or you could use this as a backup when things don't quite go as planned. And a few thoughts about that. Recap. First of all, remember that the heat goes down when something fails. It doesn't go up. It feels like the heat goes up, but it doesn't actually, not in terms of spectator awareness. Once they perceive the trick is over, whether it's successful or failed, once they determine that the moment is past where it is completed, there is no longer any heat. In the moment where a trick has failed, there's no more heat on method. The heat is merely on embarrassment. And if you have a way to get beyond that, if you have a backup plan, there's no reason to feel embarrassment because you're going to get them anyway. Okay, so remember that. Magician fails plot means the heat goes off after that revelation that things did not go well. Okay, number one, that gives you a lot of opportunity to do things that you otherwise might not be comfortable with, like copying or palming and improvising. Okay. Second thing is that when that heat goes off, if you are looking for a card out of a deck, even if you're in an effect and looking for a card doing a spread call, remember that if you are looking for the card from a face-up spread, there is no heat. Just in terms of the phenomenon of the moment, the phenomenological moment, there is no heat because you are actually overtly, outwardly in front of the spectator, obviously looking for the card to remove. And if that's what you're doing, there's no assumption of sleight or moves or manipulation. Okay, so keep that in mind too. Third, keeping that in mind, there's no reason to do a sleight necessarily in this kind of situation, especially if you're following the trick fails plot. If you're looking for a card, you don't necessarily have to spread in a particular way. You can cut the card to the top of the deck very openly. You can do an open control. And then lastly, just a couple of techniques. If you are going to spread call, you do have a natural break by which you can grab that card. If you in-jog the card at the top and then out-jog the spread on top of it, the pinky can easily grab it. If you cut it to the top of the deck, you can acquire your break from a biddle grip, push over with the pads of the fingers, grab the in-jogged lip, and then you get your break. Okay. And yeah, that's it. Those are my thoughts on that. So saving your trick with card to box, especially if you're at a table, card to pocket, go for the back pocket. A cop is easier and more covered in this environment and less, I think, less open to scrutiny. Even though the heat's way down, it's less open to scrutiny, I think, than a top palm or some other kind of palm, even a bottom palm, where you have to orient the card. Cops, if I'm going to do a palm, I live and die by doing a cop. I think that is the most accessible kind of palm that you can do. And I've heard a lot of other people talk about that too. I know Daniel Madison loves to do the cops. Loves to do the cop as well. And I see a lot of, for the common magician, if you're not really willing to do palming, as I am not, investigate doing a gambler's cop, because it is a lot more accessible, a lot more covered. And if you're fluid about what you do next and motivated in terms of direction about what you do next, that might be the way to go for you. So just a few thoughts from a moment this past week. So good luck with that and happy magicking.